What a nice, scripture passage, isn't that, for Christmas Eve? Not peace, but a sword. Do you like the ninja Jesus that I put up there? I don't like it so much. Because that's the image of Jesus that we get, or that many people get when we read the passage that I just read. This ninja warrior Jesus who has come into our world, and he is wielding a sword. Something is not adding up here, because just a few moments ago, were we just not calling Jesus the Prince of Peace, the everlasting Father? I mean, this whole time of year, indeed this fourth Sunday of Advent, it's all about peace. And the images of peace that surround us during this time of year. We sing about having peace on earth, goodwill to all. We sing about the night that Jesus was born, saying, "Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright." We recall the words of Isaiah, who referred to Jesus as the Prince of Peace, the everlasting Father. And yet we have ninja Jesus to deal with, the warrior Jesus. You know, Jesus came into this world, and when he did, as far as I know, there weren't any swords at the manger in Bethlehem. There wasn't any of that. But he did bring his peace, and he extended it to all. I think of when the disciples were out on the Sea of Galilee, and they were out on that boat, and then the storm erupted, threatening to destroy the boat and the disciples. What did Jesus do? Jesus rose and he said, "Peace, be still." And then the wind and the waves, they stopped instantly. And before Jesus ascended into heaven, he gave his peace to his disciples, assuring them that he would send them his Holy Spirit at a later time. And then later, the Apostle Paul, in a letter to the church at Philippi, referred to the kind of peace that Jesus gives as that peace which passes all understanding. With his birth, that first Christmas morning, he brought divine peace into our world. And it's still here today. And still to this day, Jesus is trying to place that peace into our hearts. Because that's where we need it now more than ever. You look all around you. We are surrounded by war. We're surrounded by violence. Everywhere we look. And yet Jesus is the Prince of Peace. And yet we have to deal with the ninja Jesus. What is Jesus actually trying to say here? Because I don't know about you, but if I were not a follower of Jesus and I read that passage, would that make you want to become a disciple of Christ? No. I know I wouldn't. I don't think that I'm like, wow, this guy has some issues here. But you got to understand that, Jesus, when he spoke, he spoke primarily in metaphors, okay? He spoke in metaphorical language. He spoke in parables. And we see here that the sword that he is talking about is not a sword that is used to wage actual war. It's not about that at all. The word sword means something else here. And that's what we are trying to understand today. What does he mean by that? Well, let me begin by saying this. Jesus came into the world to bring his peace. And yet, throughout his ministry, his disciples were always trying to figure out what kind of Messiah Jesus was. What kind of king are you? What did they have in mind? Did they think that he was really a peaceful king? No, they didn't. They thought that Jesus was going to be the ninja Jesus, the warrior king. He's going to come in. He's going to set us free from the grip of Rome, the political leaders of Rome, as well as the Jewish religious leaders. He's going to come in. He's going to bring that sword, and he's going to tear it up, and everything's going to be great for Jerusalem here on out. But that's not the kind of king that Jesus was. This is the king who comes in and he spends time with prostitutes, with tax collectors, with lepers, with people who have been alienated from society. This is a guy who comes in and says, I know what you've heard said, but I say this. This is a guy who comes in and says that you are to love everybody. Oh, by the way, including your enemy other, whoever that may be. This is a guy who came in and he didn't wage war, physical war with a sword, but he did bring division. He did bring conflict. And that's what the word sword means here, is that whenever Jesus is on the scene, I promise you, there's going to be some kind of conflict. There's going to be some kind of division. Now, don't get me wrong. Of course, we know that Christ wants unity among us, but when we start loving others and caring for others and forgiving others the way that Jesus did, there's going to be division. When we love the way that he did, when we talk the way that he did, there will always be some kind of division because it goes against the grain of society. It goes against the grain of culture. And that's exactly what Jesus did. He came in and he turned things upside down. He went against the status quo, and he wants to do the very same thing in our lives. To come in and to become the first priority in our lives. And this is not because Jesus has some kind of ego problem. It's not about that at all. It's about putting God's love number one. I love my family. I love this church. I love cake. You all know that. But if any of those things become number one in my life, those things become an idol for me. And that's why God's love has to be first. When God's love is first, then everything else seems to fall in place. Even if it seems like it's fallen apart, God's love is first in your life, everything else will fall into place. And that's what he was saying here. He's not saying, okay, you should hate your family members. He's just saying that this divine love, this agape love, which is unconditional and sacrificial, that should be number one in your life. And when it is, it's going to cause some conflict in your life. It's going to cause some division in your life. You know, I'm thinking back when I first became a follower of Jesus Christ, I was 20 years old. 20 years old. I wasn't at a church. I didn't go to some crusade. It's a long story, and I'd love to share it with you sometime. But I became a follower of Jesus, and it's like I woke up that next day, and everything was different in my life. Everything had become different. I never felt so alive in my whole life. I'd never felt so much peace in my whole life. I never felt so much love and joy and hope. And that was by coming to Jesus Christ, by just simply praying, say, I didn't even remember what I prayed. But what I do remember, God responded. God responded in a way. And again, when I woke up that next day, my family thought I had lost my mind. My friends were like, "What is wrong with you? You're not the same Steve." Now, I will admit to saying that I was a little passionate about my newfound faith. I was probably, quite zealous about it because I wanted everybody to have what I had. And I really meant well. Yes, I was obnoxious, but I meant well. But what had happened in that moment, despite me being obnoxious and all of that, is that for the first time in my life, God's love had become number one. It had become my top priority. And I wanted everybody to know that love. And when we do that, it's going to turn some people off. But you know what? Like Mother Teresa said, if that happens, love them anyway. Just keep loving them anyway. No matter what. Just keep loving them. Keep loving those around you. Keep loving your family. Keep loving your friends. Love the stranger. Love those people in your life that may make it very difficult for you. Find a way to love them. And when we do that, God's love is first. And yeah, it may cause some division, but do what God has called you to do. Another thing about the sword that Jesus talks about, again, it's about creating a type of conflict, a type of divisiveness. And not only will it create some divisiveness between you and the other person, but get this also, it will also create a conflict within yourself. Hearing this passage today should create a conflict within all of us right now at this moment. Because you know what? We are a mixture of light and dark. All of us are. Now, I know that you think that Pastor Steve is 99.999% light, right? You guys aren't convincing. No, just like you. I'm just like you. We have light and we have dark within us. We have love and that which is not love. That's within all of us. And then we read this passage and Jesus says, I came not to bring peace, but to bring a sword. It starts to divide the darkness from the light within us, so that all is left is indeed the light who is Christ. Many of you have probably had some kind of surgery before, yes? I think we even have some doctors in here. There's Dr. Greg's a surgeon, yes? Or you've done surgery. And when you go in to do surgery, a doctor needs what? A scalpel, right? And he'll use that scalpel to remove that which is unhealthy from you. Yes? Well, I think that's the same thing. That Jesus is kind of like that divine physician. That he comes into our hearts, not to destroy our hearts, but to bring healing to it. And he brings the sword, and it's a healing thing, to come in and to cut away those things that keep us from experiencing peace and love and joy and hope. It doesn't always feel good. It rarely feels good. And yet he comes in to do that. So when you think of this passage, think of it maybe in a different way. That it's not about a warrior ninja Jesus who's coming to wage war on our enemies, those who are not like us. No, that's not it at all. It's about putting God's love number one in our lives and growing in God's love in our very hearts. I struggled quite a bit with this passage. I struggle with every passage, and especially this one. But it just seems to me that now more than ever, the world that we live in we have to take this message to heart, that of peace, making peace in our hearts and making peace in our world. And I want to close with this. I want to close with a story about a woman by the name of Peace Pilgrim who walked across this country a few years back. And she was spreading her message of peace and love and personal transformation to the world. In this short list, she described the signs and symptoms of inner peace. And this is what she said. Hopefully, we will have some of these within us as well. She says, a tendency to think and act spontaneously rather than on fears based on past experiences. An unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment. When we can do that, we have peace. A loss of interest in judging other people. When we have peace, that's not so important. A loss of interest in interpreting the actions of others. How many of us do that all the time? A loss of interest in unhealthy conflict. A loss of the ability to worry. Frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation. That's when you know you have peace. Contented feelings of connectedness with others and nature. Frequent attacks of smiling. Then you know you have peace. And increased susceptibility to the love extended by others, as well as the uncontrollable urge to extend love. My friends, Jesus is the Prince of Peace. He's come into our world with this sword that brings division, not war. And He's headed straight for my heart and for yours. Our thanks and our praise be unto God.